Hey everyone, in this video we're going to continue the story of Jason and the Argonauts from Ritchie's Fabulae Faciles. Now we're on part 4, which is called The Building of the Argo. And at this point we've gotten a little bit of the backstory about Jason. We've seen his uncle, right, overthrowing the throne, the way that the prophecy, right, the oracle at Delphi has come into play. And at this point Jason has been tasked with finding the golden fleece, right, which is what he's really famous for. And to do that in this chapter he needs to build a ship, which is called the Argo, and gives us the famous name of the Argonauts, right, the sailors on that ship. So before we dive into the story, the first thing I always want to tell you is make sure that you start by learning the vocab. So there's a lot of good resources out there. You can go on Quizlet, you can grab a commentary, you can even make your own list if you want to pre-read the story a little bit, but you just want to make sure that you have all the words, you practice them and you know what they are, because it's really difficult to translate if you don't know what the words mean. So instead of having to, live in a dictionary and constantly look them up, just do a little work beforehand. It'll make it so much easier to do. The second thing I always recommend is read the story aloud. So I always say this in my videos, and you hear my pronunciation, which is never anything great, but at least you want to try saying this story out loud, reading it, and listening to it. If you're a student, to have someone read it back to you. You never want to shut off your speaking, your listening skills. It'll help you out, right? You don't want to just translate in your head. Sometimes hearing it unlocks it a little bit better, and it makes the language easier to understand and translate. So don't shut that part of your brain off. Always try to read it out loud. Okay. The last thing I always recommend you do is when it comes time to actually going through the story, try what we call the read and reread method. You hear me say this a lot. You read all the way through the story. You write down any problem areas you might have, whether it's vocab, grammar, whatever it might be. And when you're all the way done with the story, you look at your list and say, where was I going wrong? Then you try to figure out what the problem was, right? So you can look up vocab. That's the easy part. If you have a commentary, I always say Jeffrey Stedman does a great job with his commentaries. It'll explain a lot of the grammar, and maybe, the explanation is what you need to be able to see it a little better. And then you go back and you read the story again, right, without looking at any help. And it should be easier the second, the third time, as many times as you need to, of repeating it until you can go start to finish without needing any help. That's how you know you really understood it and you're ready to move on. It'll also lock it into your long-term memory. Okay, so if you haven't done all that, pause the video, go back, work on it on your own. For the rest of the video, though, what we're going to do is just go through it a little at a time, and it shouldn't be the first time you're hearing it, right? You should double check your work against mine. It doesn't mean mine's perfect, but at least you have kind of a guideline to get you through and make sure that you're on the right track. Okay? So it starts like this. You have cum tamen colchis motorum dierum iter ab eo loco abesset, solos iason proficisci noluit. Okay, so you have cum tamen colchis. So you're saying since, however, colchis, right, which is where he's going, was a journey, right? So a journey of many days, right? So it was a journey of many days away from that place. So the abeset is really like the part about going away from it. And abe loco is from that place, right? Iter is the journey. So you're saying since it's such a far journey from that place, from where he is, it's a journey of many days away. Jason didn't want to set out alone, right? Solus iason proficisci noluit. So he didn't want to do it by himself. So he's looking for people to help him on this journey, right? And he needs a ship too, right? You're going to see. So he's trying to get a kind of a group together. So then you continue, you have dimisit igitor nuntios in omnes partes qui causam itineris doceret, et diem certam conveniendi diceret. So it's saying he sent out, therefore, right? Dimisit, he sent out nuntios, messengers, right? In omnes partes, we see this a lot in Ritchie's. It just means in all parts or into all places, right? So he sends out a bunch of messengers, right? And they're messengers who would tell, or maybe even explain would be a good way to do doceret there. Teach, explain the causam itineris, right? The cause or the reason of the journey, the reason for the journey, you could say. So he wants messengers to go out and say, like, hey, we're making a journey. Do you want to come? Here's the reason why I'm going, right? And not only that, but they're there to decret, to set, or maybe even tell the set day, the diem certam, right? The set date of convening, conveniendi, right? So it's saying that they're not only going to go out and explain what they're doing here, but also to say, hey, here's the day we're all meeting together, right? The conveniendi is the genitive gerund, right? So they're trying to tell people when to meet and why they're going to meet up. So the messengers go out to try to help Jason because, again, he doesn't want to go by himself. Then you continue, you have interea postquam omnia quaesunt usui ad armandas naves comportare usit. Negotium dedit Argo quidam qui sumam scientiam nauticarum rerum habeba, ut navem aedificaret. So you have, meanwhile, right, well, all this stuff is going on. He's trying to gather up some friends, right? Sounds kind of lonely. after he ordered, so you might even say like afterward he ordered that, right? You have the indirect statement. So he ordered that everything, omnia, everything, or all things, maybe it's a better way to do it, all things which were, or which are, sunt usui, of use, right? For ships, again, you're getting that purpose here, the ad armandas, right? It's almost like for the purpose of ships, to be armed, right? So the naves armandas, again, it's like the arming of ships is really what's going on there. You have the noun plus the gerundive is what you're looking at with armandas, naves, and again, it's usually easier to translate as just ing, right, plus an object. So for arming ships is probably a good way to do it. So he ordered that everything which was of use for arming ships, comportare, be brought together, be collected, right? So he's trying to gather all these resources so he can equip a ship and arm ships and get everything ready to go so he can go on his journey, okay? And he did it negotium. So he gave the task, right, the negotium, to a certain Argus, right, Argo there, to a certain Argus. And it's not just a random person, but he gives it to Argus because it's a certain Argus qui, right, who had the summam scientiam, who had the greatest knowledge of rerum nauticarum, nautical things, I guess you could say, like nautical affairs. He's a really good mariner, maybe is a good way to kind of think of it. But he had the greatest knowledge of nautical things. So he's like, this guy's going to help me get the boat together, right? So he gave this task to Argus, who had the greatest knowledge of nautical things, so that he might build a ship. And that's really what we're getting at here, right? So that Jason can build a ship, get everything together. Let's build a ship. It's going to be the Argo, and we're going to go on our journey, right? So they're collecting resources. Then you have in his rebus circiter decem dies consumpti sunt. Argus enim, qui operi praerat, tantam diligentiam adhibebat, ut ne nocturnum quidem tempus ad laborem intermitteret. So it's saying in these things, right? With all this stuff going on to get everything done, around or about decem dies, 10 days were consumed, were spent, right? So they spent about 10 days to get everything done. For Argus, all right, who qui operi praerat, right, who was in charge, I think it's kind of what you see in a lot of commentaries, who was in charge of the work, the operi, right? So was in charge of the work. He applied such diligence, right? Tantam diligentiam, right? So the adhibebat there could be like he applied such diligence that that not even the nocturnum, right? Not even in the night or at night, the tempus, right? Time intermitteret ad laborem, time was lost for the work, right? It's kind of one way to put that all together. So it's saying he was so good and so effective of everything that was going on, with the result that, so that ut is a result clause there, with the result that time, was not lost for work. So they're still working at night is the idea. The nocturnum is kind of the key phrase there. So even at night they're going, and that's why he's able to do it in only around 10 days, which seems really impressive to get everything together for building a boat, right? And build the boat, rather. And then you get to the end. So you have ad multitudinem hominum transportandum navis Paulo erat latior quam quibus in nostro mari uti consuevimus. Et ad vim tempestatum preferendam tota navis aerobere facta est. So you're saying for the multitude of men, right, to be transported, transportandum. So for this kind of purpose, right, for this to be able to be done is really what's going on there. So again, here we have the noun plus the gerundive, right, when you have that transportandum. So for this, right, for the transporting of men, or transporting the multitude of men, the ship, the navis, Paulo erat latior, it was a little wider, right? The Paulo there is your ablative of degree of difference, right? We see that a lot. It's modifying latior here, which is a comparative. So it means like by a little, right? It's kind of usually how you do it. I would just say a little. So it was a little wider, right? Wider by a little than, because you have a comparison. And you probably want to imply like those, right? The ships which, right? So it was wider than those ships which, quibus in nostra mare, in our sea, right? We are accustomed to use, right? Consuevimus. Uti, right? So we are accustomed to use on our sea. So he's saying they had to be a little bit wider, okay? Because they have such a large amount of people going to go on it. and right, they're not even they're wider. It's talking about something different. So they're wider to get the multitude of men, but then you have and for the purpose of is really the idea of withstanding, right? You have perferendam vim tempestatum for withstanding the force, the whim of storms, tempestatum, right? So again, here it's the same idea of having that gerund there. So it's like for the purpose of stopping the violence, right? The vis there, whim is the accusative singular of vis. It usually means like force or violence. Either one would work here. The force of storms, for the purpose of kind of blocking all this out and stopping it, the naus, the ship, was made, facta est, a robore, right? It was made, the entire ship, rather, the tota naus, was made from oak, right? So it was made out of oak trees. So it would be really, really strong, right? So they build this ship that's a little bit wider to hold all the people. It's much stronger because it's made out of oak. And now they're ready to withstand all the storms on the sea and have all these people on it, right? So this is the Argo, the special boat that he builds. So hopefully that made some sense. Again, there's a few trickier lines if you're following the progression of what we're doing in Ritchie's. They start to throw a lot more gerunds and stuff at you. So again, there's a few kind of trickier spots. It's a good way to brush up on your gerunds, things like that. There's a result clause in there, a lot of subjunctive, but that's really what this story is trying to get you to work on. So hopefully it made some sense. If you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the comments below. But otherwise, double check how you did it against what I did. And if you're in the same ballpark and feeling pretty good about it, you're probably ready to move on. All right. But always just make sure that you're able to do this without needing to look at any of my notes or anything like that before you go on. That way, you know, you're comfortable and you can read the rest of the story. Good luck.